So it's interesting times. It doesn't get any easier, but it is what it is. And what I wanted to chat to you about today on the Sporting Edge is really probably something I've chatted a bit about before, but coaching in Corona is something that needs probably more attention. And I imagine that most of you out there who are already, looking at this, that's what a real coach should be doing now, is trying to understand, how do I coach through Corona? Because one of the biggest risks you face at this stage is the lack of engagement, the lack of real face-to-face personal engagement that coaching brings. And that's how you build a coach an athlete relationship, is by interacting and the exchanging of thoughts and ideas, etc. So right now we have this changing world of coaching, of sport, of everything. And it has to change the way we coach. We've got to find a way to be able to coach through Corona. Now, obviously, a lot of that may necessarily not include face-to-face sessions. In most cases, it doesn't include that. So how do you do it? Is it really that possible to share a skill or a technique online? I think it is possible, and I think it's very important that it be done, because it allows the individual to challenge themselves, hopefully, to take on board the necessary processes that need to be followed in attaining a skill. It depends also what age and what level your athletes are at. If you're coaching primary school or younger children than that, kinder or nursery school children, it's very difficult to not be able to be face-to-face together with those people and those children to demonstrate the skill. You can do that online, and there's maybe fun ways that you can create with music and dancing and stuff like that. There's possibly ways that you could create some level of engagement, but engagement remains the key word. Retaining some level of connection, developing some ability for the coach athlete to stay in contact and develop some type of a relationship, something that can be used as a platform, perhaps when face-to-face coaching comes back, use as a platform to then actually, move the relationship into the more appropriate space, or to the more beneficial space. So coaching in Corona is probably going to be about online. It's going to be doing things like this, where you're able to engage your community on a greater scale. It's going to be about taking on board feedback. It's going to be about trying to understand what's relevant to your players, to your athletes, to your community that you're working with. And these are all things that a coach has to take on board right now, as opposed to, I think, pre-COVID, where many coaches were just about really a little space, about where, the space of rocking up to coach a team or to coach a club group. Or now it's a little bit broader. Now you've got to take other things into account. And I think this is where coaches need to start thinking, writing down, getting a book, using your computer, whatever mode you use, to try and work out, what is this new era and what does it do to my coaching philosophy? Your coaching philosophy generally starts with the question, why do I? And then you continue to answer the question in the development of a coaching philosophy. And a coaching philosophy basically is your GPS, your strategy, your own frame of how you intend to coach and what is important to you as an individual coach. Very difficult at this stage to necessarily transcend the current Corona crisis whilst implementing a physical coaching philosophy. And so as coaches, we are not immune to the fact that we've also got to actually shift here. We also need to take into account how we need to look at the new world and what does it mean to our players and how do we interact with our players. On the one end, we're going to have a whole batch of players that are potentially ending their careers, who potentially would have looked to end their careers in 2020. There's Olympians that I imagine perhaps it was their last Olympics. Not too sure, to what extent the Olympics will look, how to look next year. It is being spoken that, it'll be very watered down version of what we're used to. We're not sure what that's going to look like. So there's going to be a whole bunch of athletes that are going to potentially retire from the sport. Is there a way that those sporting codes can find a way to retain those, those sort of experts, the highest level of professionals in the game? That's it remains to be seen. There may be some coaches that, with their players, particularly in an Olympic environment, that may also say, look, I don't have what it takes now for the next, 4 years. Because basically, competing in World Cups and competing in Olympics, although as spectators we see those once every 4 years, for an Olympian that happens every day. For a professional sports person, it's not once every year or once every 4 years, it's every single day. And they create those environments for themselves every single day. So as a coach, we need to be aware that there's going to be a batch of coaches that are going to be exiting the sporting world. There's going to be a batch of players. More importantly, though, for coaches that are staying in the environment, is what is the young talent coming through and how are they reacting to the status quo? How can you engage and how can you communicate and continue to mentor this talent, get them into the right headspace to actually transcend where we are right now? So looking at the incoming talent or, the continuously developing talent, and how are you interacting with that talent base now at various ages to make sure that there's a conveyor belt of excellence that's, shifting all the way up, as I say, to Olympic gold medals. Each coach has a role to play in that. There's no question that we need to take on board how we can incorporate not only our sort of philosophies that need to change, but how does that then relate to the players that we're dealing with. It's very important that you start to develop, if you haven't already, a very key grasp of technology, the ability to do videos of this nature, doing other videos where it could be skills demonstrations, involving experts in addressing your group. They're using this time to look at awareness programs where you're creating awareness around the particular code that you're playing. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of coaching and a lot of elements off the field that actually will continuously influence what goes on the field or in the court or in the pool. And so are these those times where we get a chance to actually philosophically address values and culture? In a recent presentation that I gave to a coaching group in South Africa, I spoke about my 3 factors for coaching and keeping it simple, really centered around culture, process, and performance. So although at this stage with Corona, performance is not really there, we can look at elements of where our culture stands as a team, as a club. We can look at the processes we've used pre-COVID to develop what we hope is the most positive performance and a winning performance as much as possible. So we have the opportunity now during various lockdowns and changed circumstances for a lot of codes, sporting codes around the world, where we can spend time on looking at culture, on discussing our culture, on making culture a bit more tangible, looking at words that we can own, looking at concepts in culture that we can actually own that then become behaviors. We can look at processes of how we, running our club, how we're running our teams, how we are building, taking our culture, putting it into our process to then influence our performance. These are all concepts that we have to be able to take on board in the new Corona world. And certainly various parts of the world are at various stages. Some are completely locked down still, some are semi-lockdown. I live in Melbourne, Australia, where our metropolitan areas have all, just as of last night, midnight, have all been locked down and for 6 weeks. So we had a period of lockdown for 2 or 3 months, I think, and then we got opened up a little bit and we were allowed to move around, but unfortunately we're now back in lockdown. So this is my sort of idea around how I'm going to engage with communities that I work with, and I would urge that in the management of talent, in the mentoring of talent, that you find a way as a coach to look after your relevance and your brand as a coach, but also to be really selfless and to reach out and to make yourself available to the athletes that you're engaged with. They rely on you. Hopefully they trust you, and they will come along this journey with you, as long as you, as the conductor of that journey, as the driver on that journey, know where you're going. You will inevitably have your players on board with you. So in what I call the Corona crisis, coaches need to be able to coach in Corona, and I welcome all your feedback. Please share any examples of engagement that you have had during Corona from a coaching perspective, a sports coaching perspective, so that we can start to share these with other coaches and make an impact. It's important that we understand that nothing we do as coaches really belongs to us. We have to be selfless. We're doing it for the love and the passion that we have for growing people, for growing excellence, for growing performance, for unearthing talent, for engaging with imagination, and for appreciating diversity and acknowledging adversity. That's why we do what we do. Part of the philosophy, certainly part of my philosophy, is that which I've just explained. So, in saying that, stay at the edge of sport, keep thinking, keep looking at ways of doing things differently, better. Don't discount what you've done in the past that's worked. If it hasn't worked, don't be too harsh on yourself, move forward. But in the Corona crisis, how are you going to coach?